Greetings from the Philippines to the world. We are on Facebook Live, on Eagle News, and also on our streaming site, eaglenewslive.com. Watch us on our YouTube channel at Eagle News. I am Cesar Vallejos. Welcome to Open for Business. Join me discover the latest news and information in business around the world. Stay ahead of the curve from vision to action. Reports say that the Philippine economy is likely to grow at a faster pace of 6.5 to 7.5% this year on the back of much improved government spending, benign inflation and easy monetary settings. However, there is a string of global headwinds that may impact on the economy's growth. What are these global headwinds? How will the trade wars and other international happenings affect us? Not to mention the natural disasters that unfold right before our eyes. The Taal volcano, for example, is still on alert 4. How resilient is the Filipino, and how can businesses manage these challenges? How realistic is the 6.5 to 7.5% growth, and can the Philippines remain its position as one of the fastest growing economies in the region? Today, we will have a peek of the crystal ball of Mr. Rui Moreno, the Vice Chairman of the Center for Global Best Practices and the Chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the Management Association of the Philippines. Before he joins the set, here's the business news this week. Business Mirror reported that the eruption of the Taal volcano may only have a minimal impact on the country's GDP growth unless the disaster becomes prolonged. According to the National Economic and Development Authority and local economists, Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Ernesto Pernia said that the eruption will have some negative effect on the performance of the economy in the first quarter of the year. However, given its current scale and intensity, Pernia said this will not have a significant impact on the first quarter GDP growth. As reported by Business Mirror, Union Bank Chief Economist Ruben Carlo Asuncion said that the most immediate impact of the Taal volcano is on the prices of various goods and services. A prolonged emergency situation where constant ashfalls, earthquakes, and work stoppages may result in a negative impact on economic growth because we are talking about major financial, industrial, and residential hubs. The government may rethink its GDP targets this year if the worst-case scenario happens, and that will be the 7 months of volcanic activity. Full year 2019 GDP growth estimates will be released before the end of the month. In other news, according to the Department of Agriculture, the damage to agriculture due to the ongoing eruption and volcanic activity of the Taal volcano has reached 577.59 million pesos, with more than 2,700 hectares of farmlands affected by the Taal ash fall. The DA report said this amount includes farmlands planted to rice, corn, coffee, cacao, banana, and high-value crops. This also includes 1,967 affected animals. The Department of Health, Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Trade and Industry provided updates on the measures being undertaken in response to the recent Taal volcano eruption. Here are some highlights of the economic press briefing in Malacanang.
As of now, the Department of Health has augmented the resources of Region 4A and Region 3, and we've been helping distributing medications, especially for asthma and antibiotics for children who might get infections, N95 masks and surgical masks, collapsible water containers, just to make sure na yung tubig na iinumin nila manggagaling sa gripo tatakpan at hindi malalagyan ng abono at hindi siya mako-contaminate. We also have eye drops for those who are suffering from eye irritation and possible infections. And the Department of Health has so far downloaded about 5.4 million pesos worth of commodities, medicines, and goods for our patients and yun nga mga affected population.
Pursuant to the declaration of state of calamity in areas affected by the phreatic eruption of the Taal volcano, prices of basic necessities are automatically frozen at their prevailing prices. Additionally, the Department of Health, which we fully support, issued Department Memorandum Number 2020-0005, which upholds price freeze of all basic essential medicine, including medical supplies such as the N95 mask, disposable face masks, nebulizers, and oxygen formula. The DTI clarifies that while basic essential medicines, N95 masks, and other medical supplies are under the jurisdiction of the Department of Health, the DTI continues to assist this agency in the monitoring of prices and supply of these basic products.
In that event po, ang DAMAS at ang Regional Agribusiness and Marketing Assistance Division, yung po yung AMAD na tinatawag ng DA at ang BIFAR, ay kapatuloy pong nagmo-monitor, katulong po of course, katambay po natin ang DTI, si Jose Cruz Ruth Castelo, para po mapanatili natin ang regularidad pagdating po sa presyo ng mga produkto. Iyan po ang instruction ng Kalim, at gusto ko rin pong ipaalam na out of this calamity, ay meron naman pong beneficial na mangyayari. But of course, that benefit is not compensating yung damage. Una po sa lahat, inutusan po natin ang Bureau of Soils and Water Management kung ano po ang magiging bagong kalagayan after that eruption. Alam naman po natin, nung 16-something, 18-something century, ay pumutok din po yan at nabago po niya yung geographic condition, including the agroclimatic condition. Kanya po, ang nakikita po nating beneficiary rito ay na-replenish po yung soil natin. There is a short-term, medium-term, and long-term benefit kaparehas po ng Mount Pinatubo. Maraming salamat po.
Our discussion on the economic outlook for 2020 when open for business returns. Stay with us. Open for Business is back, and with me is Mr. Rui Moreno, the Vice Chairman of the Center for Global Best Practices and the Chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the Management Association of the Philippines. Sir Roy, maraming salamat. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay. We have a very exciting topic because a lot of the reports, a lot of economists and also the business sector are already making projections, and even we have a lot of viewers coming from the small and medium enterprise sector, and they're really optimistic about 2020. And as I mentioned earlier po in my report, the forecast is at 6.5 to 7.5% GDP growth. So far, with what's happening with the volcano eruption, Sir Roy, what is the impact of this to GDP?
Well, obviously, the government has already said that there will be an impact, although relatively minor, towards the first quarter of this year, of the Taal volcano eruption. But it will. I agree that it will still be minimal, so long as there is no explosion that impacts on the locators that are in the Calabar zone.
Yeah, you were off cam, Sir Roy. You were telling me that there are a lot of locators there, a lot of
Yes,
investors.
investors. Because you must remember that the Region 3, NCR, and Region 4A, which is Calabarzon, the three of them account for something like 65% of our GDP.
Wow.
And so of that 65%, from what I can recall, something like 20%, 25% is probably Region 4A.
So that's huge then po in
This
terms
is a
of
huge thing,
in terms of
yes.
the contribution of these
Area.
these areas in the GDP.
Yes.
So what do you think po in terms of do you have specific knowledge on the specific outputs of these areas?
Well, the specific outputs of these areas are mostly in the manufacturing side. There's a lot of importation of raw materials for manufacturing, for example, auto parts, auto harness parts for companies like Yasaki Torres, for companies also like manufacturing in YKK, Zipper. These are major manufacturers in the area and importer and exporters. And Batangas Port, I understand, is also a major location for importation of vehicles. No. So there could be a significant impact. Hopefully it will not be like Pinatubo, which resulted in a slowdown in central Luzon, and also at the same time accelerated the exit of the American bases, particularly Clark.
Hopefully the impact is not that huge,
No,
because we also got reports earlier po, that if the activity will be prolonged, like say it will go up to 7 months, the government may have to rethink their GDP targets.
Well, as I said, it really depends. If it stays limited within the certain area at this moment and has no impact on the industrial zones and on the manufacturing, there will be an impact, of course, on the livelihood of people, particularly on the SMEs, which probably will have to start thinking about what alternative crops could be planted, or the government will have to think, particularly Department of Agriculture, DSWD, onto what are we going to do with the people who have been displaced.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there were reports the other day of huge pineapple plantations
Yes.
being wasted, and also a lot of the coffee as well.
Coffee,
And
yes.
with the SMEs there, they do a lot of they offer a lot of horticultural plants,
Yes.
with other produce. So, to you, sir, based on your, like, say, with your exposure with the associations of businesses, what could be a good way to somehow revive these small industries, and how do you think can this micro, small, and medium enterprises be again be given that kind of
I think what has to happen is really we have to look at it from a supply chain perspective. Maybe a big brother, small brother type of approach. There are these MSMEs have already have certain, are part of the supply chain. And so that means that the market that they are currently supplying, they could probably help them in terms of saying, all right, let us see what other products or what other locations you could go to. But that's going to be a medium to long-term development. Cannot be immediate. So the immediate approach is probably what the government is doing, which is really trying to help them just help them with current needs.
And Sir Roy, another impact based on some data that we got would be the impact to tourism? Because we
Yes,
know
of
that
course.
Tagaytay, Batangas is such a beautiful area,
Yes.
and it attracts a lot of, I think, 500,000 tourists. What do you think would be the impact to that sector?
Actually, for the tourism sector, they're relatively well established. These are hotels and nature spas and the nature spas. They should be able to continue to offer their services. The only problem really is this issue of the ashes, which nobody can control.
That's right.
No.
That's right.
And so, for example, I have a friend who has a zoo in Tagaytay. I think you know that. He has tigers. This is Robert Yupanco. And he has already said that the animals, he has to take care of them and see what, in terms of the ashes, in terms of making sure that they don't have a nervous breakdown, and so there will be an impact, negative impact.
Now, sir, with these issues, we cannot really, as you mentioned, the government is doing its role as well. But with your exposure with infrastructure, what do you think would be? How would the government fast track infrastructure development or rebuilding? Because I think that's a major requirement of the people who are
Well,
affected.
no, but I think that we should look at it at a more macro basis than just looking at it and saying, well, these 50,000 people, 80,000 people have to be helped. And definitely they have to be helped. But the country has to go on. The economy has to continue. And therefore, really, we have to look at what are the areas, the challenges that we have as a country, especially in terms of infrastructure, the issue of, for example, roads, the issue of power, the issue of water, the issue of port development, because everybody, and this all results in traffic, traffic congestion. And that is something that has to be addressed. The immediate addressing of that should be traffic congestion, which decreases productivity. For example, we have some calculations that based on the fact that traffic in Metro Manila costs something like 3.5 billion pesos a day.
Wow.
If you were to reach
3.5 billion a day.
a day,
Okay.
no? Something like that. And if we were trying to reduce that to a cost per person, it comes out to something like 250 pesos per person per day. That includes, the travel time,
Yeah.
the
So in
productivity
short, that
time.
is what you are wasting.
That's what 250 pesos.
Per
and
person.
how much is our minimum wage? 600 pesos.
So that's
So 20-30%.
Yeah.
In terms of food, also, for example, for the rice, a major logistic supplier in the supply chain globally, they tell me that the figure of 16% is the cost of transportation. So for them to move from the manufacturer or from the source to the retailer, 16% of the total cost is
That's also
transportation.
Okay.
Metro Manila, anecdotal evidence says that the cost of transportation is something like 29-30%, maybe even 35%. If you were to reduce, for example, rice, if you were to reduce the transportation cost of rice to maybe 20%, from maybe today 30%, the cost of the retail cost of rice would go from, let us say, at the moment around 45 pesos a kilo to probably somewhere around 25 pesos a kilo. So there is really a major impact if you can address traffic. And how do you address traffic? in my opinion, it's really immediate, no? Immediate. Because you can talk about all the skyways, all the
Yes,
MRT,
yes.
the
That's a little
subways,
long term,
just
short term,
medium, long term.
medium, long
But
term.
immediate is really enforcement of traffic laws, which means that you really have to train your MMDA aides and your highway patrol to not take the attitude of no harm, no foul. No. No, sino nasaktan? No, meron ba nasaktan? Wala naman eh.
But I also see, Sir Roy, that you are engaged with other activities that concern other areas where the congestion of Metro Manila can be done. Like, for example, Clark is an
Yes.
area where there are a lot of projects already being developed there so that it can help the congestion.
Yes.
Is that also an immediate solution, or do you think it's a medium to long-term
No,
solution?
no, that's an immediate solution. But then again, when you look at Clark as alternative or Batangas Port as an alternative, then you have to also consider other factors. Okay, you have Clark. What about the immigration officials you have to assign in there? Do you have enough? What about the DOH personnel in terms of quarantine? You have this issue of some kind of disease that is coming out of China that seems to be antibiotic resistant. So you really have to have quarantine personnel there. What about customs personnel? We seem to sometimes take a look only at the hard infrastructure. What about the supporting infrastructure?
So government has also to spend on that because
Of
there's
course.
additional manpower,
Yes.
additional office.
And qualified people,
Yeah.
and must be very qualified people. No. And
But do you think right now infrastructure in Clark is ready? We have world-class. Do we have world-class airports there already? We have
or building up to that?
yeah. Do we have a lot of in terms of readiness to receive all this new
Well, in terms of tourism, in terms of infrastructure, yes. And in fact, the government is also talking about building that railway between Clark and Manila, which is good. And right now, if all the roads in Manila or in the Philippines were like NLEX, I think, and SCTEX, I think all of us would be happy.
That's right. That's right. Sir, you mentioned a lot of challenges. Of course, you one is traffic. One would be other in terms of infrastructure. And traffic is just one of them. But going back to our main topic, which is the GDP growth, we already mentioned, and you are very pessimistic that somehow the impact of the eruption would be minimal. But coming, from the sentiments of the business sector, do you think it is doable? It is achievable? And what would you think would be the factors that would make us reach that 6.5 to 7.5 growth?
Well, it is still achievable, the 6.5. I don't know if we can make 7.5, that is, it's always good to have, especially as you know in business, to have this stretch target.
Positive sentiment.
No, stretch target. No, for me the 7.5 is a stretch target.
Okay,
no,
okay.
more realistic is 6.5. But really, what we have to also look at is also the power. No, everybody talks only about roads and congestion, etc. And but also power, because the rule of thumb appears to be that for every 1% increase in GDP, your power supply must be, including reserves, must grow by something like a factor of 5 to 6 times. No, and Malampaya is just around the corner in terms of I will not use the word running out, but it's ending. It's commercial. In other words, you can already foresee the end of the commercial viability of Malampaya.
Sir, before I make a follow-up question on the power side, And before we go into a break, a lot of people say that, okay, you have 6.5 GDP, and some sectors would still complain about it. But when you compare us with our neighbors, how competitive are we? So, because sometimes you have to look at it on a regional level for you to appreciate what's going on in the Philippines. How do we fare with our neighbors?
Actually, if we consider the past 2 or 3 years, we fare much better than our ASEAN neighbors, especially in terms of growth. We have grown faster than Thailand or Malaysia, but in Indonesia, the one that really has grown much faster is Vietnam, at something like 7%. But that is because Vietnam's, shall we say, economy is more, has more legs to stand on. Agriculture, manufacturing, which is and foreign investments, and also tourism. No, they have been able to attract at this point 18 million tourists into Vietnam.
Yeah, but Sir Roy, are you looking at them as major competitors now? Because
All of the whole region, we should look at the whole region and the whole world as our competitors. We should not be ashamed to compete. In fact, I think we have to go really beyond planning, but really go into project execution.
on that note, we'll talk about how the Philippines can be really competitive in the international market when Open for Business returns. Stay with us. Open for Business is back, and still with me is Mr. Rui Moreno, Vice Chairman at the Center for Global Best Practices and the Chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the Management Association of the Philippines. So, Roy, the last question was more on the Philippines being competitive as we make our industry, especially also our micro, small, and medium enterprises competitive in the international market. So what are your strategies to ensure that this MSMEs and, of course, our large industries to be competitive in the international market?
Well, let me just say that when it comes to competitiveness, our large and some of the medium companies are very competitive already. Look at San Miguel, look at the United Lab, look at Oishi, etc. No? But in general, especially for the medium and small enterprise, I think we have to have a thinking that what we give to the Filipino people should be are exportable overseas, are acceptable to the export market, not the other way around. That if it is good enough, if it is acceptable internationally, then we can sell it locally. It should be we sell it locally because it's very good quality.
That's right.
And very competitive price, and then we go overseas.
So
That should be the type of thinking.
Right po. But there are global standards.
There are global. That is why what should happen is that the small and medium enterprise should not say, "I am small and therefore I cannot comply," but maybe they should understand what is the standard, and what do I have to do to achieve that standard. And you will not get it right the first time or the first year. You will build up to it. It will take you maybe 2 or 3 years or 4 years. And who should you experiment with? It should be with your local consumers. No, because if the local consumer will accept it, then that means the the international market will accept it. Because the international market will say, Well, but if your local market doesn't accept it, why should we accept it?
But you know, how do you somehow describe the Filipino consumer? Or is it
The Filipino consumer is driven.
are we also discerning? Are we looking
No,
forward?
but that is part also of the fact that there should be an educational mode to it. The Filipino consumer tends to think only in terms of price.
That's right.
No.
Ano yung mura?
Mura. And the salesman, I was also in marketing for quite a long time. And the salesman will always come back to you and say, hindi pwede ho dahil mahal. We have to reduce the price. As one of my bosses put it to me one time, many, many years ago. Well, if I want to sell a light bulb and you tell me that it's a question of price, I don't need you. I will just get my house help to do it because price, anybody can sell based on price. But one should sell in terms of quality. And in terms of service. No. And that takes time. That is a continuous process. But it starts with the owner. It starts with the leadership of the company, of the enterprise, and of the agency.
Okay, now sir, let's go back to the challenges that you mentioned. We tackled already about congestion. We tackled about power, but with power, you mentioned about earlier about this alternative source to Malampaya. But are you foreseeing more investments in terms of power generation, participation of foreign investments coming into the sector?
Yes, because power is always it's a need for any economy, and therefore people or investors are always interested in that. Maybe we have to review our rules to see if we can encourage further investments by maybe lifting certain restrictions to foreign investments in that area. Because really, among the comments that have been made is that there is a duopoly or sometimes even monopoly, because it's always the same group in one form or another that is in different areas. No? And we don't have to say who these are, we all know. But that is also because of the fact that they are the only ones who are qualified. For example, people talk about in roads, in construction. Why is it always the same people who keep winning the big projects? Because they're the only ones who really are qualified. Even when you go to the provinces, there are only two or three contractors that are qualified, really qualified under the rules. No?
They pass the standards and also the quality of
The quality,
their
no?
work. Okay.
So we have to really expand the market, not only the market, but also the supply, the supply of good people, good technical people, because that is one of our competitive advantages. We have our competitive advantage really is our human and natural resources.
Always, yes.
Yes.
That I think is, known all over the world.
Yes, but sometimes we, as a people, we underappreciate that. And it shows sometimes. My siblings and my siblings all live overseas, no? Because that's where they found their way. And basically, whether in the United Nations or in the international banking, etc. Now, what they were saying, in terms of, for example, the pillbox that Dr. Solidum, they were saying, we didn't realize that he was such an expert. Our country should be happy to have him. And so my comment was that we tend to underestimate our government officials, especially the civil service. That there are really very good people in there who really want to help the country, but we should know how to use them. But the private sector also is not sinless. They should also help improve not only their companies but also help in the community. as a whole
Yes, to really be sustainable.
to really be sustainable.
So Roy, also, what's the contribution of agriculture? One of the is the outlook for agriculture also bright for 2020?
Well, it appears to be so, especially under the current Secretary of Agriculture, who is very well respected in his area of competence, and who has the full support of the president and the economic managers. You know. And the agriculture sector really has to be improved, because at the moment it only contributes something like 10% to GDP compared to service, which is at 50 or 52%. And 15 to 20% of our population is still in the rural sector, especially not only the farmers, but the fishermen. We really have to help them look at, see how they can fit into the total supply chain, so that DA and DTI should not look at it in terms of silos. Because when you talk to DA, they will say, oh yes, here's the product. Sell it, or you have to talk to DTI. When you talk to DTI and you ask, where's the product? Where's the raw material? They'll say, well, we have to talk to DA. So really, there should be a continuous process, not only a silo process. But really, right now, when you go to the provinces, you can see among these small and medium enterprises, a very close cooperation between DOST, because of the, for example, the process for production, DA for the raw material, and DTI for the marketing. So I have seen that, for example, in Davao, that some of the cottage product, the offshoot of coconut products, that they and pineapple products that they have tried to develop for candy. That was done together with DOST, that's provide the technology, DA, the raw material, and DTI.
So all the government offices, bureaus involved,
they must be
support
involved
in
in this development for agriculture. If not, it will be all talk. And we are also very good in planning. The whole region recognizes that the Filipinos know how to plan. But what has to happen is that we must execute in a timely manner. And that is because sometimes we take the attitude that everything must be perfect in place before we act. When, by the time that happens, it's finished. Tapos na ang opportunity. So we should not let the good stand in the way of the perfect. Or the perfect stand in the way of the good.
So you also listed other areas. Of course, tourism, you mentioned tourism, agribusiness.
Yes. Education.
And also the IT-BPO. What's your, again, with all these sectors, one of the biggest news, of course, in the recent months, especially with the appointment of the Director General of ARTA. What to you is the impact now of the ease of doing business? Do you think, what's your outlook there? Is it really, easing the doing business for the MSMEs? And what areas do you think would need improvement in terms of implementation?
Yes. Actually, ARTA has helped. But my only comment, as I've said that, as I mentioned to you earlier, and I've said that also in other meetings, that they should also look at the law again and realize that their role is not only to expedite red tape or minimize red tape, but also there is a developmental side to it. That, for example, one of the roles is to put to have government agencies work together, which is what we did with the National Competitiveness Council. Bring in all the agencies together and see how they should all work together to ease business. Because ease of doing business is not only in terms of business permits,
Yes.
and licenses, etc., and approvals, but it is also Or what about linking up, for example, LTO and MMDA? To use a very simple example, do you know that today MMDA catches you on camera running on the yellow lane, and so you have to pay the fine before LTO will register the car. But first of all, it takes MMDA 2 months, 3 months before you get the notice. When you go to pay, it turns out that they have not linked it to the LTO. So somebody can register even though there's a violation. And I read in the papers.
And the violator may have forgotten it already,
Yes, yes.
especially if it's 2 months.
That's right, and may not even have been aware
Yeah.
because it's by camera, yung no contact.
Yeah.
And I read in the papers that there was some bus driver that had 800 tickets, violations over 2 years, and yet his license, I think, was being renewed, or maybe he was going in, getting a new license. Who knows? No? So ARTA should pay attention to these things. Make sure that these government agencies link together. You know, for example, customs and DTI. You know, to be sure that DTI has records of the imports that are coming in and the values, etc.
Sir, what about your efforts on, because you mentioned earlier about competitiveness, and of
Yes.
course you have a role with the Philippine Quality Awards. What is the role of raising quality and to be competitive? Because I think we also guested DTI executives here, and they were talking about, of course, data about the Philippine competitiveness that is really being monitored to raise the competitiveness level of the country in the investment arena. In your case, what projects do you have, that raises the quality and competitiveness?
Well, we have the Philippine Quality Awards. Philippine Quality Awards is covered by a law passed in 1997 and implemented starting in 2001, in which the President recognizes through DTI as the manager the companies that are nationally and globally competitive. In that, and when we talk about quality, quality award, it is not quality as we understand it per se, which means quality or padala sa quality department, quality control department. What this means is that it is a review of the total operations of a company or of an enterprise or
Including
an
the
agency.
process.
Including the process and including also the financial area, the development, R&D, risk management, audit reports, what are the issues that are being, and so all of this is brought together and presented to the management to say, we have now assessed you, this is our evaluation, these are the areas for improvement, and based on our findings, this is the award that will be received, that we recommend that be received. We recommend to the Board of Judges that should be received by you based on the number of points. As a total organization, not only quality.
I see.
Quality is used here in terms of quality of the total organization, not of the production process only.
So are we looking at many companies who are joining this?
Yes, yes. In fact, one company that has won here, that has been awarded, sorry, not won, but has been awarded is United Laboratories as an outstanding model for companies to follow because they're competitive. And there have been discussions within DTI as the project manager to say, okay, we will have also maybe another approach for small and medium enterprises because they're still small and they will not be able to meet the criteria. And my attitude there is no, we should start them properly and say, these are the criteria. Now see if you can meet it, and if you cannot meet it, what are the areas that you need improvement, and how can we help?
Yes, at least there's a goal for them to level up.
Yes, yes, no, and not say, oh, we will protect you first, which is what has happened to us. That's why many of our industries are uncompetitive, because in the 60s and 70s, we decided to go into this, continue the protectionist attitude, or let's wait until they grow. 50 years later, we're still protecting them, whereas the Singaporeans, the Malaysians, the Thais opened the market.
Yes. Yes.
And said, okay, we will compete.
Okay. Oh, now, sir, we're running out of time. Before we finish this interview, sir, what's the sentiment of the businesses in 2020? There's a report that just came out today. It says that the business optimism in Philippines among top 10 globally, but in your case, with your dealings with the Rotary, with the business owners, so far, how do they see 2020?
I think in general they still feel that it is, still feel optimistic in general, because all the parameters are in place, financial, the monetary, the support of the government agencies, because remember that in the end, the private sector, the government should just create policies that enable business to grow. And business should comply with these policies or support these policies. That's why there should be always this consultation between the public and private sectors. Because when the public sector officials talk among themselves, they come out with regulations, which may or may not be applicable to companies. On the other hand, when the private sector sits together and talks about their issues, it comes out as a griping session, because they can't do anything. They need the government to help improve the policies. No?
That's right. Assuming, Sir Roy, if you have that much power to implement, what is that policy that we will change, eradicate, or abolish to ensure that the GDP target of 6.5 will be achieved? I know it's a combination of a lot of things, but in your mind, what is it that should be that's very critical?
I don't know if you can come out with one policy to make that happen. I think what has to happen is that there must be a change in mindset of everybody in terms of holding the person, whether in the private or public sector, not only responsible. You're responsible for this part of the process, but not only are you responsible, but you're also accountable. And there must be also certain rewards or certain punishment in case you don't meet it. Because with us, we tend to say, yes, I'm responsible, but I'm not accountable. It's he, not me. You know?
Sir Roy, your final message to the micro, small, and medium enterprises who are watching us today.
I would like to just encourage you to please really look at the business that you're in as an opportunity to not only have a good revenue for your business and also for your own needs, but also to see how it contributes to the development of the country, particularly in helping address the issue of poverty alleviation. Because you, as the SMEs, are the ones who really generate employment opportunities. And not only the employment, but also livelihood opportunities. Because remember, we should also teach our children not only to study well, to become good employees, but to study well, to also become entrepreneurs.
Wow, that's a very insightful statement from Mr. Rui Moreno, the Vice Chairman of the Center for Global Best Practices and the Chairman of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee of the Management Association of the Philippines. Thank you very much, sir, for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you
Open
the
for
invitation.
Business will be back. Stay with us. And our term for the week is pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. According to dictionary cambridge.org, it is a name that has been invented for a lung disease caused by breathing in very small pieces of ash or dust, a chronic lung disease caused by the inhalation of fine silicate or quartz dust. Pneumono refers to the lung, ultra means extremely, microscopic means tiny, silica is sand, volcano is self-evident, and coniosis is scarring. Put them all together and you have what the Oxford English Dictionary recognizes as the longest word in the English language. And our word of the week is from Alan Bradley. He said, "If you remember nothing else, remember this. Inspiration from outside oneself is like the heat in an oven. It makes passable buns. But inspiration from within is like a volcano. It changes the face of the world." Thank you for watching Open for Business. Join us again in the next episodes of Open for Business for more insights from CEOs, thought leaders, and industry experts promoting business development in the Philippines. See you again every Saturday and Sunday here in Open for Business, where we discuss business information, deliver the latest business news to keep you informed and open for business, and be ahead of the curve from vision to action. You're on Facebook Live on Eagle News, and you can watch this again in the video section of the Eagle News Facebook page and on eaglenewslive.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Eagle News. For Open for Business, this is Cesar Vallejos. Have a great day.